And in that little motel room in Tuscaloosa, we observed how the corporate-controlled mass media on the TV were slowly but surely fanning the fires for war. You could tell when they were turning the burner up a little bit by the way the disaster logo would change on the screen. Have you noticed how every scandal or tragedy or disaster instantly has its own logo on television news? Some lucky web geek got the gig to make those up on the spot whenever something really heavy goes down. It started out, America under attack, tragedy in New York, America responds to America's new war, America fights back. Sure enough, the first person I saw on TV openly call for going to war was the Wicked Witch of San Francisco, Senator Dianne Feinstein. And it began to grow from there. There we were, being conditioned as over and over again you'd see the towers explode as the second plane hit the South Tower. Kaboom! The big fireballs. Bang, bang, bang. CNN had collected the most different angles of the second plane going in, and even one of the first plane. Eventually, every time they got a new one, they had to re-show all the other ones they had in the trophy room. Kaboom! Kaboom! And again, the Trade Center buildings collapsing silently. Even though in New York City it was so loud it registered on the Richter scale, but on TV, silently, with a little John Tesh-style new agey plinking piano in the background, some sort of sad melancholy tune. You couldn't help but be emotionally affected and want to make the hurt go away and want to find who's responsible and do something about them, get them. And you couldn't help but imagine what it was like to be in one of those buildings or be on one of those planes, suddenly finding out you're about to get killed. But we also had to be aware of false images that the corporate-controlled mass media has such a long track record of using when they want to lead lemmings off the cliff into a war where some of their boards of directors can make a lot of money. The first one arousing suspicion right then and there on September 11th was CNN's footage of the celebrating Palestinians dancing in the street because they were supposedly so happy that all those people died when the buildings went down in New York. And some people have alleged that that footage was actually from 1991. Others insist it's not. I have no idea, but it is interesting that the woman in the scarf with the big old Cheshire cat shit-eating grin dancing in the front of the picture had on Peggy Hill glasses, which were pretty far out of vogue even in 1991. The last Gulf War, some of you may remember that there were stories splattered all over the papers and the TV about how the savages in Saddam Hussein's army were storming hospitals in Kuwait and dumping premature babies out of incubators and leaving them to die on the floor as they ran off with the hospital equipment back to Iraq and all. And they trotted out a seemingly shell-shocked young Kuwaiti woman to talk to the media here, and I believe Congress as well, about things are terrible in my country. The Iraqi army is running amok. Please help us save Kuwait for democracy. It turned out the incubator story was planted and that woman hired by the Hill and Knowlton agency employed by the Kuwaiti royal family to wag the American dog into launching a full-scale war in the Middle East just so they could get their throne back. Democracy be damned. Then again, I think we've always had stuff like this going on. In the early 80s, there was all this hysteria over news reports that a Libyan hit squad had been sent to infiltrate the country to assassinate Ronald Reagan. They even ran sketches of the supposed hit squad in all the papers, which I then wanted to use as a promo photo for dead Kennedys, but that got vetoed. But later on, they admitted that the whole thing was fiction, and it all came from the fertile mind of a hothead in the White House basement by the name of Oliver North. With that in mind, a piece of me can't help but wonder, and at least ask the question, does Osama bin Laden even exist? We haven't found him yet, have we? And it seems to me that what went down in New York and in D.C. and all the other things they now claim he was responsible for, was it really all done by some evil genius hiding in a cave who supposedly is so sick from kidney disease he needs regular dialysis treatments? Does this mean as we're bombing the caves in Afghanistan, he's running up and down mountains with his dialysis machine, continuing to elude our troops and all? Something doesn't fit here. But by blaming it all on one big evil one, the boogeyman, we've made Osama bin Werewolf an overnight pop star all over the Middle East. They sell candy in Pakistan with his picture on it now. There he is with a little grin and all. And they sell posters in the streets with the buildings going off up above. And you can even call up Osama on screen on your cell phone over there too. Dial it up and there's Osama, and then it morphs into the buildings blowing up and collapsing. Other people see this stuff differently over there, and this is what we've helped inspire. Gulf of Tonkin incident. Another example. In 1964, supposedly some North Vietnamese gunboats supposedly fired on some American boats, and that whipped up enough outrage that President Lyndon Johnson was able to ram a resolution through Congress, the Gulf of Tonkin resolution that again hardly anybody voted against because they were scared of being labeled soft on communism, giving President Johnson and the Pentagon, who repeatedly deceived him about the nature of the war, it turns out later, a green light to go into Vietnam and do anything they pleased. What do we get out of that? Almost 60,000 Americans dead. Many, many more, including some of your own parents, scarred for life by that war. Dwarfed by the number of Vietnamese, death toll estimated at 2 to 3 million people, and many, many, many more injured and damaged for life over there. And now, even the corporate media acknowledges as though it's no big deal that for all practical purposes, the Gulf of Tonkin incident didn't happen. Thanks for telling us. We did that at the turn of the last century, too. One ship blows up in a harbor in Cuba and sinks, and then William Randolph Hearst, the one who the Citizen Kane movie was made about, and his granddaughter Patty was kidnapped and now is in John Waters' movies, that Hearst. He was a right-wing newspaper baron. He plastered across all his papers, "Remember the Maine!" That was the name of the ship. "War with Spain! Remember the Maine!" And sure enough, we did. Great excuse to seize the Philippines and Puerto Rico and slaughter 500,000 Filipinos in the process. So with that in mind, what was the Gulf War really about? Oil? Well, I know. I did the Die for Oil Sucker single at the time and all that. But looking back, maybe it wasn't. I mean, what do oil company people care? What do Dick Cheney types care whether or not they're buying their crude from the dictator of Kuwait or the dictator of Iraq? OPEC sets the price. They're going to pay the same regardless. What do they care? So maybe another big reason for that Gulf War was to show off all the fancy new weapons we'd been manufacturing and all. Look at these smart bombs, and these, of course, named the Patriot missiles. And look at these stealth fighter bombers and B-2 bombers and all these new tanks and anti-tank weapons you'll need to blow up those tanks. And they're all for sale. So hey, oil sheiks, hey, dictators and other heads of state, looky here. If you don't buy some of this stuff, someone else will. So is the real Gulf War just an exposition fair to show off new weapons of mass destruction? After all, United States' share of the world arms market after the Gulf War went up from 18% to over 50%. Britain being number 2. And speaking of 1984, have you noticed the repeated warnings that we're going to have another terrorist attack in 5 days? They did that at least twice last fall. The second one was saying that the evil werewolf was going to blow up the malls on Halloween. Didn't happen. Last winter, ash crack comes out again. We're going to be attacked again. We've received reliable information, perhaps from Arthur Anderson, that we're going to be attacked again within 5 days. Didn't happen. This time they say, oh, you better watch out this holiday season, or there could be a whole new meaning to Saturday in the park getting bombed on the 4th of July. They claimed it again then. And to make sure everybody was cowering, hiding under their beds from the evil ones and not paying attention to the Patriot Act sailing through Congress and all, 2001, an anthrax odyssey. Never did I think that all I would have to do for entertainment would be to go to the supermarket, look at all the bags of flour, and start laughing.